Hey everyone, Colin Weston with the ModGolf Podcast. We are back with our first episode guest ever from 2017. Wow, it's hard to believe we're 110 episodes in and have the ModGolf YouTube channel up here for, almost a year here too. So we're playing a little catch up today with our good friend Ron Powers, who was with Topgolf and is now with Full Swing Simulators with what was Topgolf Swing Suite. So with that, before I completely mangle up the rest of your title there, Ron, I'll let you now jump in and explain exactly what you're doing, why you're doing it. But hey, I want to first say, hey, welcome back to the ModGolf Podcast. Good to see you, my friend.
Yeah, likewise, Colin. I miss you, as I do a lot of my friends. Yeah, great to see you. Yeah, we're here and flourishing. COVID dealt us a set of bad cards, and we, as they say, we made lemonade. We had laid off about 46 out of 48 employees back in March of last year, 2020, and didn't know exactly where the business was going. But thanks to Ryan Daughters over at Full Swing Golf, we created a very unique strategy, bundled up the business, and basically sold it to Full Swing in October of 2020, and he reinvested in it, and now the business is we've got about 80% of our venues open, and I think we've sold another 60 simulators under the Swing Suite brand here in 2021. So
that's amazing.
This is going great, and very thankful that we were able to pull off some creative deal making.
Yeah. Hey, so we just finished up our audio conversation here for the long form podcast, which I really encourage our viewers to become listeners to hear that conversation. So I'll have that in the link below, as I always do. So I wanted to switch things up here a little bit, Ron, because we did go into depth about what you've done and where you're going. And I appreciate that conversation. It was really engaging, and I learned a ton from that. So I do want to shift around here to kind of give kind of a different lens or a different kind of spin on things here. The fact you've been in the entrepreneurship space for quite some time in the gaming industry, and then of course bringing that over what you've learned and applying that to the golf entertainment industry. I want to focus more of you kind of helping our viewers here that either are entrepreneurs, considering entrepreneurship, or even in any industry, especially the golf industry, looking at different business opportunities, but maybe are reluctant or a little nervous, or they're conservative of thinking there's too much risk. So perhaps we can focus more on entrepreneurship, starting with what do you consider to be kind of the characteristics that define an entrepreneur?
Well, that's an interesting question, because right out of college, I think 6 months after I left college, I was working for Western Union, and I got a wild hair and started a dealership selling telex machines for Western Union, of all things. And I got just a little bit of a taste of that independence and the uncapped opportunity. And I spent most of my life, chasing these wild dreams, and fortunately, a couple of them had paid off, and I just kept swinging for the fence. What's happened, I think, in the last probably 15 years for me is doing a little bit more measuring, right? Taking a pitch here and there, as opposed to swinging at every ball that came at me. And so I think there's a balancing act between allowing yourself to be creative, thinking open-mindedly about the market. I don't care what you're trying to do. If you want to be the best gardener on the planet, or you've got a software idea, or you've got a new idea for an app, be honest with yourself about what you're trying to achieve and who you're serving, right? And I think these days, especially in the probably going to be a slap in my face, but especially in the millennial context, allow yourself to be a server, right? To service a community, whatever that community is, and treat it that way. Take the humble pie, and don't be boastful. Don't be so cocky you're gonna step on your own unit. But I think that's a big part of it. And then measure, right? It's said, one thing I learned from Eric Anderson was, you get an idea, you formulate it, you think through it, you model it. What's that model going to look like in the near term? And then don't stop there at a 12-month. God, if I could sell $1 million worth of this product in 12 months, I'd be happy. What does it look like if you were allowed yourself to dream and there were no constraints? What does it look like 5 years from now? What is the real viability of that? Because when you start talking to somebody who's, try to think of a good example. A friend of mine here in Bend, Oregon, came up with this product called the Rack Stash. And it basically, where do you put your bike rack, right? It's always laying on your garage floor. You got to move it because your wife can't get her car in, or the kids can't get their bike out. They're always moving the bike rack around. Well, he came up with this concept of mounting essentially a trailer hitch to your wall so that your bike rack goes into this trailer hitch. Well, it was a great idea, solid idea anyway. But his dream was, make millions of dollars from it. Well, there's a limited market, right? There's how many trailer hitches are sold. What's your penetration rate going to look like? When he started doing the math, this was a $500,000 opportunity. Nobody retires on $500,000 of sales. And so I use that as an example, and sorry, Kent, for picking on you, but that's just an example of the market wasn't quantified. B, there wasn't enough margin in it for it to be a lifestyle play. And C, he never did a 5-year projection. And so, you put all this time and energy into it, spend a year in product development, and then walked away with, $500,000 or $250,000, whatever he sold it for. So creativity, resilience, understand the market, and then long-term execution, I think are the keys in my opinion.
Yeah, those are great ones. And to kind of double down on that, and I now teach a lot of students in entrepreneurship, and the first thing we want them to do is understand very, very quickly, and we do Google Ventures 5-day design sprints now, so they'll know and build a prototype and the prototype could just be like cartoon sketches of the story of what this would unfold of the customer journey, and get reactions and feedback. Because you just mentioned with your friend, I've seen it with people too, that it's with startups, they focus so much on the product development and they fall in love with that. And I'll be honest, the first thing we ever did back in 2012, 2013 in the golf space, we were guilty of that also, right? Of not understanding the market, even understanding the business model, the price point, the supply chain. Ron, you're very familiar with the business model canvas, where you've got like 9 different sectors, and your pricing your product is just one of those, and your channel partners and all the other ones that you have in there are just so critically important to your success. So yes, for entrepreneurs out there, it may not be the sexy, glamorous part of it, but you've got to go out there and talk to people and listen. Don't try to sell. Just put it out there and see if people actually want it. Because as you know, with your friend, the worst thing you want is create a product on time, on budget that nobody wants. It's the worst.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. You also need to be so well. I did this presentation, I think I told you, down in Las Vegas here a few weeks ago, and the focus was on, surviving COVID from a business perspective. And, the one thing that we lost in the process, and I haven't really thought about how to articulate this and what it really means to the world in general, but I predicated my success in Swing Suite, or the success of the business, I should say, on our internal profitability. Right? How much revenue did we generate? What were our overall expenses? And what was the margin that was created from that? That's how I measured success. In a B2B world, and this is in particular specific to B2B, I should say, if our partners are not successful, if our partners are not making margin, that business goes away quickly, right? I told the story earlier about our lease model. It was extremely profitable. I pounded my chest about how successful we were from a margin standpoint, but we did have a handful of partners that were not making money. So had I to do it all over again, that measurement of success would have been my partner's margin attainment, which would have ultimately led to my margin attainment, which would have meant that business is very sustainable for the long haul. So if you're in a B2B world, just make damn sure that your partners, that the application you're providing, the service you're providing, the product you're providing, if it's not leading to successful interactions with your partner, then you're probably not long for the world.
No, it's a great point, Ron. And so many entrepreneurs, and I see them all the time, where they're then going on about all the features they have and the things that they're doing, and not understanding or articulating the value that they can add for that customer, whether it's a business to business customer, business to consumer. And that's
Yeah.
that's really what it's all about, right? If you cannot add value for what they're doing, because in your business also, and in every other sector, if you've got people that already have a technology or a service or a product in place, your product has to be X times better for them to actually emotionally and physically and financially remove themselves from that, to kind of turn the ship to actually onboard what you're doing. And so many organizations and people and entrepreneurs and founders don't factor that in enough, that you really need to articulate that. And Topgolf has done such a a great job of doing that, also with the partners they have, as far as the licensing agreements they have, whether it's from Coca-Cola and some other and all the other partners there. It's like they're not just putting their hand out and saying, you know what, yeah, give us some money for stuff. It's like, well, here's the value that we will add for your business. And I know Eric Anderson is very strong at that. He's kind of mastered that, and you've learned a lot from him as the chairman of Topgolf. And kind of segues into my kind of next question here, as far as who's inspired you. You mentioned Chip Bauer from with Callaway. Can you maybe talk about a few other people that, or even Chip, that have inspired you over the years, and the kind of qualities that they exude, whether they're your heroes or your mentors, or people that inspire you in the work that you do?
Yeah, I probably have two legitimate mentors, and then a handful of very important influencers for me personally. And I go back to my very early days out of college. I think I mentioned this in the podcast, but I stumbled into the copier industry. Right, it was just an accident, and the thing that was so beneficial and so rewarding about that was the individual that I worked for. He ran that business like a sports team. He paid us extremely well. He trained us every quarter. Those of us that were in leadership, we were taken out of the field for a week and put through some kind of a training program, sales training, interview training. We did a week-long memory training class, which I can't remember. Seems odd, but he trained the hell out of us and then paid us very, very well. And we had fun. Right. Every quarter we had a trip that we would go on. So here was this environment that he created, and I would have run through a wall for him just because he asked me to, just because he just had that heartfelt motivational kind of perspective. Rolf Jensen was his name, and unfortunately passed away many years ago. The second mentor that I had, completely different individual, Dennis Ryan, who I worked for at PopCap before we sold the business to Electronic Arts. He was a very analytical guy. Very stoic. He just studied things to a degree that really drove me crazy. But as he and I got to know each other and developed respect for one another, I would have run through that same wall for Dennis, not because he was a motivational speaker, but because I trusted him so much that he had already done all of the analysis, and there was something better for me on the other side of that wall. So those were two very different individuals, one very dynamic and charismatic, one very stoic and analytical. So you don't have to have mentors from the same categorization, just leading to the same result, which was running through a wall.
I love those two examples, and it ties in so heavily into what is leadership as compared to being a boss. Right? They talk about when people quit a job, they don't quit their job, they actually quit their manager. They usually quit the one that they're directly reporting to more times than not. That's been proven in the HR world. So I love those examples you gave, and that ties into something else I wanted to ask about, and that is about culture, because in both of those cases that you had mentioned, in those two businesses there, the way they led, either through example by doing or by also engaging the staff and the leadership like yourself and empowering you, that made you, like I said, you'd walk over hot coals for them, because we know in entrepreneurship, and I've seen it with you in business a couple of times, and in entrepreneurship and business, it's not a straight line up. COVID has made it go even down. So with entrepreneurs and founders, if you're just in it for the money, guess what? The people that are working for you are only in it for a paycheck also. And when things get bad, you're gonna bail also. So you have to have that why, as Simon Sinek says, and that defining kind of moment that you can rally around. So on that, I want to ask you as we finish up here, Ron, talk about, obviously from PopCap Games and even Topgolf, what have you learned about culture that now with Ryan Daughters and what he has with Full Swing Simulators and bringing in? So talk about what you've learned about culture and the importance of that, and how you're carrying that forward in the future with Full Swing Simulators.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had two fantastic life experiences where culture was a cornerstone. One, it worked, but it was contrived and it was very brittle. The other was inert, necessary, and boasted about at every level of the organization. PopCap would be the first, and I'll explain that in a second. Topgolf is the second, the latter. It's you go from any one of the 70 venues to the next venue, and you're going to be greeted exactly the same way, same level of enthusiasm. I don't care your gender, your race, your height, your weight. You're going to be greeted with that same level of enthusiasm, because we literally, the people create that culture. We established what we thought our core values were based on the environment we wanted to create, but the people create that culture. And Topgolf does a tremendous job of reevaluating those core values annually, just to make sure that they're in check, right? Has our organization changed? Do we have different core values today at 23,000 employees than we did 4 or 5 years ago at 6,000 employees? So, not reviewing it for the purposes of staying current, but reviewing it for the purposes of being on target with the employee base and the environment that we currently have. The PopCap, going back to whatever it was, 2007, when I joined the company, they actually had a department called workforce culture. And while that sounds important on the surface, they were in charge of, what does the break room look like? What kind of beer would we put in there on a Friday afternoon? Are there plenty of snacks there? All that stuff was nice to have, but what I learned in that environment is you can't mandate culture, right? You don't have a department that shows up to your meeting and says, "Hey, you guys got to laugh more," right? That doesn't work. It's got to be embedded and ingrained in the organization. You can't separate it. It's not like finance, right? Finance, I want a CFO who's smart and has got a degree. I want a controller that knows what's going on with the day-to-day business. I want an accounts receivable guy that is a hard ass and is going to collect every penny. That's not true with culture. So those are two examples where I think PopCap, good intention, and we did have a good culture, but as we grew, it was wonky because it was being managed by a department. Topgolf, it was part of the leadership core. And we all had to exude that same value. And the fact that we're reviewing those core values again annually was, I think, one of the most critical endeavors that we had.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks for both of those examples. And I've seen that with entrepreneurs. They focus so much as founders on product, on the business side, which of course is critically important. And they think, well, the whole culture thing, we can kind of graft that on later, like a limb on a tree, and you can't. Once it's baked in, if that's who you are and what defines you, you cannot change that. And you can offer all the free avocado toast and kombucha on tap that you want, but it won't change things.
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah, and it has to be systemic, right? That's the other piece of it. I think that is important.
Absolutely. So, hey, don't want to take up too much of your time here again. So I do encourage our viewers here to go listen to the conversation Ron and I had. He'll talk about all like his entrepreneurial journey, all the great things that he's done and is doing now with Full Swing Simulators, as I mentioned, with Topgolf Swing Suites, and even how the whole business morphed over there and what's gone on in the last year and the impact of COVID. So, wow, it's been quite the journey. I'm just so happy we had a chance to reconnect here again, Ron, for a second time today here on the ModGolf Podcast with our video edition on our YouTube channel. So hey, Ron, I'll put it below, but why don't you tell our viewers here how they can find out more about all the good things you're doing at Full Swing Simulators.
Yeah. So both the Swing Suite business, the Full Swing Simulator business, and the new Full Swing Launch Monitor can all be investigated and reviewed at fullswinggolf.com. You can get it soup to nuts, and Colin, thank you for having me. It's been a fun 4 or 5 years getting to know you, and I'm happy to be a returning guest. So thank you for having me.
Appreciate that. Hopefully we'll have you on again before another 4 years slips away here. I'm sure we'll have lots to talk about. All right, Ron, take care. Good to see you, my friend.
All right. Thanks, brother. Take care.